Well, it's time for another rant, rave, or whatever the hell you want to call it. The other day I was looking at the local newspaper and the jail population was down because of COVID. We still had some COVID deaths that needed to be explained. But one of the things that really bothers, actually it just bugs the hell out of me, is how they keep wanting to add prisoners to the jail. In the 50 years of my law practice, I have seen jail populations go at an exponential rate. And I've been trying to compare them over the years. But when I first practiced, you could call up a bondsman or a judge and get a client out within a few hours. Now, because of various regulations and the fact that they've scared the shit out of the public, it takes over a day. So somebody get arrested, they send in what they call a bond commissioner to see if a bond is possible, and if so, at what price to set the bond. Then they take the case and the data in front of an under 30 generally type county court judge who sets a bond, which is generally recommended by an under 30 type DA, and none of them know shit about anything, but they've got a schedule and nobody questions them. That's because mainly their opposition is the district attorney opposition, namely the public defender's office. Most lawyers don't get in at that stage, or maybe there'd be some change, I don't know. It's been a while since I've been there. But I can remember from my own experience with my own arrests, it was quite a bullshit thing all the times I've been arrested. So, instead of being able to get in and get out of jail, it generally is an overnight affair, which adds money to the expenses of the county or whoever is running the facility. And where they used to use summons, now they have compulsory arrests, particularly in the areas of something like domestic violence. They've got a must-arrest policy, which probably is right out of Adolf Hitler's playbook, but nobody's really questioning that because they think it's politically correct to protect women from abusive husbands, even though they ignore the cultural factors and the fact that sometimes it's the only people that a certain class of people, it's the only way they can communicate, but it doesn't matter. You've got a bunch of bourgeois middle-class women that get offended every time somebody raises their voice or threatens violence, and they think they're in a position where they have to protect all women from this kind of violence, and therefore break up marriages and relationships and things like that, and interfere in areas in which they know absolutely nothing. So now, the jail population in Boulder was cut down because of COVID, and they want to add more prisoners. It's really interesting because University of Colorado, which is located here in Boulder, has had a criminology program ever since I was in school, which has been half a century ago. In fact, they had a master's degree in corrections in which I was enrolled back in the 60s. So what we have here is we've got criminologists, and under the Nixon administration, criminology was damn near abolished, and it became a matter of criminal justice, which instead of theoretically figuring out what causes crime and what to do about it, it's a political system whereby you figure out how to lock up more people quickly and more efficiently, and how to administer things efficiently. So in other words, where you might have 100 people in a jail, you can adequately and efficiently administer 300 for the same amount of costs, etc. Then you get reform. I remember one reform we had in the 80s. It was called the Bail Reform Act, and what they did was abolish the right to bail under common law and turn it into a vehicle for preventive detention. So instead of having the benefit of the doubt for anybody arrested, now they're presumed to be criminal and they have to show why they wouldn't commit another crime, and things like this. The real tragedy there is it's run by psychologists who don't know shit about recidivism or predictability or anything like that. It's a function of sociological structure, or as the as the right wing worries about now, what they call critical theory. Not just critical race theory, but critical theory in general, which shows the structural dynamics that oppose certain socioeconomic classes. So anybody with half a brain knows that if you got money, you are treated by the system much differently than if you're poor. And you got to look at where these people are recruited. I know very few prosecutors that didn't come from an upper middle class, well-to-do suburban country club society. Very few peasants ever made it into the DA's office. I don't know of any radicals, with the few exceptions in the South, of people that were prosecutors. Most of them weren't successful because the political parties in this country like to sell fear. They've taken lessons from the mafia and decided to shake down the citizenry with fear tactics, which has been quite effective. And the money goes into the coffers of the county and the bondsmen and people such as this. So, research would show differently. One of the things since the COVID problem has been the allegation that jails are petri dishes. Well, hell yes, they're petri dishes. They're a lot of people get disease there. Hepatitis C is up, AIDS is up, COVID, of course, and things such as this. You got close confinement, lack of really good medical facilities, lack of quarantine, and you jam pack a bunch of people in there and put them in a sort of a Darwinistic atmosphere. You're going to get things like that. So my position is, if this is a petri dish, then why not do what other scientists do and study it? We've had less incarceration under the COVID epidemic than we had before. Let's study what the crime rates have done. Let's study what the recidivism rates are. Let's study what the effect of not demanding high bonds or bonds at all of people. Let's see what the effect of early release is. Let's look at some of the data. I remember a study when I was in graduate school that Northwestern did. I think it was probably Sobel or someone like that over there, that they found the biggest impact on recidivism or repeating crime was the time between the crime and the arrest. And after somebody is arrested, it didn't matter significantly whether they were released or prosecuted or incarcerated or put on probation or what. However, you got the propaganda arm of the police, which also is fighting to increase their power through their unions, etc., that come up with the propaganda like thus: we work our asses off to protect you and keep the streets safe from all these criminal people, and we catch them and they release them. Well, if they didn't like the damn Constitution, they shouldn't have taken an oath to obey it. The Constitution clearly says people are presumed innocent. It clearly says everybody has the right to bail. It doesn't tell police to go out and arrest people and for the court system to rubber stamp their opinions or whatever, and that everybody should have a trial. But, let's dispense with trials. It's terrible to have trials. It's terrible to think somebody might be innocent when in fact he might go out and hurt somebody. Nobody pays attention to statistics. Our country is the only one in the world that has public relations-based policy rather than data-based policy. So now we have the PR machine coming out saying we got to protect the people. We got to collect this, we got to collect that, we've got to make sure people are safe. The press says, are you safe now, or do you feel safe around this, or do you feel safe around that? When in reality nobody gives a shit about safety, or should should care about the Constitution and the type of society we're creating with all these abuses. So you got other propaganda arms out there forming little groups like Black Lives Matter. There's discrimination against black people or whatever. That's a smoke cloud. What it is this discrimination against the poor. It's the matter of the people in power wanting to hang on to the power and screwing people that don't have power. So think of it this way: you get an executive that's high paid, and the propaganda line is he's rewarded for his efforts. Well, that's bullshit. What they do is they make sure he has enough power to bribe one senator, 5 senators, a few congressmen, mayor's offices, or whatever. It's the power to bribe. It's the power to exert power. Power is referent, and you have power depending on your constituencies. And the peasantry has no constituency as such, and therefore they have no power. So it's real easy for a town council or a police department or a police public relation firm to say, let's protect the streets, let's get all the criminals off the streets, meaning all the black people, or all the poor people, or all the Mexicans, or whatever. And the public sort of picks up on this because it's ingrained. It's not really taught them. They pick on it naturally just because of the way our society is structured. And now we have a chance to change this structure. We have a chance to study. We have a chance to look at things realistically. What does an arrest do as far as repeat crime? What does the impact of a social worker do as opposed to a police officer? Is it effective to have a police officer arrest somebody, be presented in front of a judge, and the judge presents or sets a bail and the defendant is released? Particularly with their propaganda expectation or propaganda campaign that once somebody's arrested, they should never be released until they're tried or whatever. That's the fascist system, the Napoleonic system, the civil law system, the system of the old Roman courts. It's not the common law system that I was brought up with or taught about. It's the system of Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, Marcos, King of Spain, etc. We don't need to have this type of system. We shouldn't embrace this type of system. But instead we do. Instead of getting experts to handle various problems, we lump all everybody together as criminals and lock them up and hope they go away. Well, that's really unfortunate. It's also unfortunate that the mafia trains our tactics for police and city and state governments. The mafia used to send around collectors and they would intimidate people. And if you don't pay us, your storefront might get hurt, your window might get smashed, or somebody might come in and beat up an employee or whatever. And that's what they're doing now. They're selling fear. If you don't let us capture somebody and keep them there and show them a lesson by keeping them incarcerated, they might get loose, get pissed off, and hit you, or strike you, or take your money, or steal your wife, or whatever thing you can think of that's bad and scary. I think it's time that we demand that some of this stuff be researched, that the research be published, that we be educated, that our lawyers and judges become educators and not just prostitutes to the system. I know I was trained as a criminologist, and many of my colleagues were too. And most of us that were licensed during the Kennedy era had altruistic plans and altruistic ideals and ideas, and none of us were in there to make money. Now it just seems like everybody is in there to make money, and money is the only relevant factor in the police and in law and anything like that. Secondly, the judges aren't leaders, they follow. and most of them don't have the guts to stand up to a DA or stand up to public opinion or go out and educate people. In fact, they're isolated. They're afraid. They don't want to talk. They're taught that you're not supposed to give opinions. You're not supposed to run for office, things like this. So that delegates everything to the lobbyists and the prosecutor's office, which have unique PR firms. The police have PR firms. And I suspect the Judges Association, if there is one, has PR firms. The only ones that don't have PR firms are the citizens, the people, the defense attorneys. And we're losing the PR race. And we've got to realize that. And we've got to cut back on some of the power. Don't let the police say we work our ass off and we capture these criminals and somebody turns them loose. Tell them to read the Constitution. If they don't like the Constitution, resign. Or if they want to change the Constitution, go out and change it like a good citizen was, not a whiny crybaby cop. That's not the way you do it. We've had our fill of whiny crybaby politicians, including a whiny crybaby president that wants to change everything. He wants to instill fascism, which is what this is cloudedly covering. We don't want a fascist police state. We want a free democratic police state. We want the public to intelligently decide on what policy is, not let the lobbyists and the PR firms decide on the basis of who pays them the most goddamn money. And frankly, I'm getting fed up with this shit. After all these years, and many of you listen to my stuff or read my stuff and are critical because I don't edit it, I don't polish up my writings, and there's a reason for that. I've got a lot of stuff to say. I'm quite elderly at this point, and I'm afraid I won't get all the stuff out that I need to say before I croak. And the last range of illnesses have made me very much aware of that. Many of you probably don't realize this, but over the last 4 years, I've lost 105 pounds due to illnesses, breaks, and things like this. I don't know how much longer is going to last, but I'm going to keep going until I can at least see some effective changes. Right now, I'm not seeing any effective changes. I don't see any following, going out there rabble-rousing for changes like we did in the 60s. I miss the old anti-war protests. I miss the other protests, the voting rights demonstrations, things like that we used to have. Things that people participated in because they mattered, because they affected our society and affected our lives. Well, environmental causes might affect our lives and protect our societies. But if we lose out to constructive fascism, it's not going to do any good, because the people will lose the power to make any kind of change at all. And money will rule, and the locusts will come over us, and when they've picked us clean, go on to the next location. Now, I would like to have more subscribers. I don't know how to do this. I'm not a PR guy or anything else. I'd like to have more readers. I'd like to have more followers. I'd like to get the word out a little bit more. I know many of you have followed me for decades, and many of you have sort of anecdotal comic stories about me. I would appreciate hearing them. I'd like to circulate. I would like to build my audience a little bit. I think I have something to say, and I want to say it, and I would like for you people to help me say it. If somebody wants to volunteer to edit my shit, I would really appreciate it. I just don't have time or energy, and I've got too much to say. Secondly, I don't know how to run all this equipment anyway. So, please, if you think you will do any good, forward my videos. Try to make them go viral. Let's try to get an audience. Let's try to get a following. I need your help. Thank you very much. Have a good weekend, or whatever you want to call it. I guess a week. It's Thursday now.